Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The supreme Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered, even in millions of eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, may we all generate the supreme bodhicitta. All right, you can all recite with me. Now let us continue to study the section on the impermanence of life from the words of my perfect teacher. We will discuss the fifth point in the impermanence of life. It presents many examples and metaphors to illustrate that human life is impermanent. This principle is crucial, yet many do not fully grasp it. Although, in essence, our lifespan and body are entirely impermanent, because of our ignorance and attachment to the ego and the continuity of self, our continuum becomes tainted and obscured, which eventually prevents us from seeing the true nature of all phenomena. Thus, contemplating impermanence is crucial when studying Buddhism. Therefore, many Kadampa practitioners dedicate themselves to the diligent practice of impermanence. Once a practitioner has conviction about impermanence, he can easily succeed in other practices. And when we practice, we cannot treat impermanence as a catchphrase or stop short at paying lip service. Instead, we should observe and contemplate them in real life. The literal meaning is easy to understand, so anyone who is not illiterate can read the text and comprehend its meaning. But when you truly practice, it becomes increasingly difficult. Initially, if you do not meditate on it, you might think it's nothing special. But once you start to practice it, at certain point, you will realize how deeply clinging to permanence is rooted in your mind stream. So, it is quite a challenge to eradicate this grasping in a day. Now, let's continue with the text. We should sincerely contemplate and meditate on these principles, including the four basic aims of the Kadampas, the impermanence of all phenomena, and especially whatever is born is impermanent and is bound to die. Next, let's continue with the following text. Whatever rises up is impermanent and is bound to fall down. High estate and powerful armies are never enduring. Mandhatri, the universal monarch, once turned the golden wheel, granting him dominion over the 4 continents. He ruled even the celestial realms of the 33 gods, and at his height, he shared the very throne of Indra, king of the gods. In all his battles with the asuras, he remained undefeated. Yet in the end, he fell from his heights, dying in a state of insatiable greed. Many of you may have studied this story before. It is found in Buddhist scriptures such as the Sutra on meeting of the Father and the Son, the virtuous and wise. It is also detailed in other texts, especially in Mipham Rinpoche's The White Lotus, great biography of Buddha Shakyamuni. As is explained quite clearly in the chapter on generosity, the universal king Mandhatri's merit is unmatched in the 6 realms. And in human terms, we could say that there has never been anyone as perfect in status, wealth, and all aspects as him. A very long time ago, there lived a king named Yuvanaswa, who grew a protuberance on his crown. When the protuberance cracked open, a beautiful and dignified child emerged. Upon his birth, many auspicious signs appeared throughout the kingdom. The king reigned over 84,000 small countries and housed 80,000 princesses. Milk naturally came out of the princesses' breasts, and the princesses all said, "Let the boy drink my milk." Therefore, people gave the boy a name meaning "King of my milk" or "King of Headborn," because he was born from the king's head. A fortune teller read the boy's face, predicting he would become a universal king, turning a golden wheel that would give him power over 4 continents. As he grew up, he used the wheel treasure to rule over the entire human realm. In the 4 continents, including Jambudvipa and Uttarakuru, and so on. He brought great happiness to living beings and preached the path to prosperity and pleasures for tens of thousands of years. Later, Mandhatri decided it wasn't enough just to rule the human realm, so he set out for the celestial realm. When he reached the celestial realm, the 62 gates of the celestial palace opened for him automatically, and the gods set up a throne for him. The throne they set was just a little lower than the Indra's. At that time, Mandhatri made a vow. With the power of my merits, I wish to sit at the same level as Indra. Following his wish, Indra immediately shared his throne with Mandhatri. From other beings' perspective, Mandhatri was the same as Indra in appearance, qualities, and speech manners, except that Indra never blinked and walked a bit faster. That's the difference between human and celestial beings. Other than that, they were no different from each other. So Mandhatri remained in this position alongside Indra for a very long time. Although the ruler of the 33 heavens constantly changes, he was always on par with Indra. He enjoyed the same offerings, service, and respect, which lasted the sum of 36 Indra's lifespans. During the reign of the last Indra, Asuras attacked the heaven of the gods. And Indra couldn't defeat the Asuras, so he ran back to the celestial palace in a panic and shut the gate. Mandhatri volunteered to fight the Asuras in battle. With his supernatural powers, he rose into the air and stood above the Asuras. Frightened by Mandhatri's prestige and merits, the Asuras finally scattered and fled. Seeing the defeat of the Asuras, Mandhatri was quite proud. At the time of the 36th Indira, he thought to himself, "My power has surpassed everyone, so I shouldn't sit together with Indra anymore. I should drive Indra away and become the only protector in the human and god realms. There should be no other being that shares the power to reign." The Indra at the time was the past life of Kassapa Buddha, who had great merit. So the moment Mandhatri generated that vicious thought towards this worthy being, Mandhatri's merit was completely destroyed. In addition to the exhaustion of his accumulated merits, in the blink of an eye, he fell to the gate of the palace where he used to live in Jambudvipa. Only then did he realize that the desires of all beings are endless, so he uttered some verses before his death. One of them is, "Though the rain of silver coins falls, the greedy ones are still not satisfied, but the wise know that desires and pleasures are suffering, and it brings no benefit to have more." He gave many great teachings at that time. From this story, we can understand that many people in the world enjoy power and status, but they can never be truly satisfied through the acquisition of power and so on. This kind of greed applies to people today as well. For example, many people are not content with what they have, and are constantly wishing to elevate their status in society. For example, from an ordinary position, you may want to seek advancement, and upon reaching a certain level, you want to rise further, constantly striving upward. This type of desire ultimately leads to destruction. As some masters' teaching states, desire destroys hope, meaning that desire can ruin one's beautiful ideals or hopes. Indeed, in the world, many people are trapped by their endless desires for advancement and are unable to control their greed and desires. Before embarking on the Dharma path, many people relentlessly forge ahead and rush in the pursuit of worldly matters. Only after studying the Dharma do you understand that all desires are endless, yet by then, life is already half spent. Looking back, you may realize that you have been living a life in a daze, devoid of a meaningful goal and direction. You feel remorseful for what you have done in the past. Such a reflection can be found especially among those who delve deeply into the Dharma and who have generated conviction about the teachings. Next, we will discuss that the truth of whatever rises up is bound to fall down can be found everywhere in life. Throughout history, no one in power has consistently held their position without challenge. Everyone in high office has faced instability, be it a king, religious leader, or local official. From ancient times to the present, whether as a king or prime minister, or as an emperor or president, all have been replaced generation after generation. So is the case with religious leaders, be it Christian, Taoist, Buddhist, or other religions. Their leaders and popes are constantly changing. Even local officials, school teachers, principals, and heads of various departments are all continuously replaced. These kinds of changes constantly demonstrate impermanence. So, staying in one position forever without change is something that has never happened in human history. Following this thinking process, we can see that indeed, all things are impermanent. Right now in this world, many examples of impermanence are constantly manifesting. But since we never received the relevant teaching, we have never been educated in such a way, and our mind was always veiled by attachment, clinging to permanence. We failed to see the truth of everything. When we look at impermanence, there are two kinds of impermanence, the coarse and the subtle. The subtle impermanence refers to moment-to-moment changes, which is even harder to grasp. Whereas coarse impermanence, such as the rise versus fall of one's social status, or the gain versus loss of one's wealth, can be easily noticed by any mindful person. But most people don't pay attention to it at all. So every day they keep themselves aimlessly busy on many mundane things. And if they cannot get what they want, they are in great anguish. Why is it like that? It is because we have not realized the true nature of all things. Many powerful individuals, who one year have been imposing the law on others, find themselves spending the next part of their lives in prison. These kinds of phenomena are quite common now. So what true value could such short-lived power ever bring you? Complete Buddhahood alone can never diminish or decrease, and is worthy of offerings from both gods and humans. This perfect enlightenment is what you must resolve to achieve. You can see for yourself that impermanence prevails everywhere. For example, the judge or statesman who imposed the law on others last year may find himself imprisoned this year due to misdeeds such as corruption. Just open any newspaper or any news outlet, and you can find such stories displayed right in front of you every day. Especially in today's society, there are various corrupt and greedy individuals. Initially, they pretend to be righteous and wise, but eventually, they cannot escape from a tragic and painful end. These kinds of situations are frequently observed. Chen Liangyu of Shanghai was sentenced last April. A global media outlet, World Manager's Digest, reported on a document submitted to Zhongnanhai China's central leadership compound in Beijing, similar to the White House in function. According to the report, a special investigation team was dispatched. The investigation revealed that senior officials at the municipal, district, bureau and county levels opened 322 bank accounts with a total value of more than 98.6 billion RMB using anonymous identities or aliases. Among all these illegal accounts, Chen Liangyu had 53 anonymous accounts with the total in them mounting up to 300 million RMB. He was later sentenced to 18 years in prison. So people like him started at the highest echelons of society, only to fall to a tragic end. Wise people may immediately see, oh, impermanence has truly manifested, especially considering his former glory. Another example, just a few days ago, on the 23rd of this month, former South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun, who should have retired, recently committed suicide by jumping off a cliff. Why? He claimed to be an honest and clean official. As the investigations and political pressures mounted, he couldn't bear it anymore, left a will, and ended his life. Of course, we would never know what really happened behind the situation. But sometimes, the downfall of those in power seems predictable, such as Chen Shui-bian, who served as the political leader of Taiwan for 8 years, but in the end faced trial as well. When comparing people's initial glory with their ultimate tragic end, it's quite telling. Consider cases like Cheng Kejie from Guangxi, who fell from one of China's highest positions to execution, and Gao Yong, Chengdu's propaganda chief, who lost everything in 2006. These dramatic reversals of fortune provide vivid examples of impermanence in worldly affairs. From their cases, we can see that manifestations of impermanence are observable in the world at any time. This includes changes among monastery abbots or transformations within lay practitioners, whether in mindset or status. Such phenomena help us understand that impermanence is readily apparent. It is easily observed. If we let the principle of impermanence really sink in, then when many worldly things happen to us, we won't feel so unlucky or distressed. Meanwhile, when things happen to others, we also know that it is the manifestation of impermanence. Thus, this practice is essential for us in our daily lives. If we internalize the principle of impermanence, then we can clearly see that everything in our life is like a dream or an illusion, and nothing remains unchanged. So what we should pursue is the state of perfect Buddhahood, worthy offerings of gods and humans. This is our ultimate pursuit, whereas transitory things, depleting status, diminishing wealth, and disappearing power are of no true use. People have habitual tendencies of competing for status, even in small groups. In the current competitive society, even in a small group of 2 or 3 persons, there is often a fierce fight over the position of leader. But careful reflection will remind you that even state leaders or other prominent figures eventually return to be ordinary citizens. Upon witnessing how far they would fall, one should develop from within an aspiration solely for the Dharma and the unchanging state of enlightenment. Nothing else holds interest. This is why many Buddhists, after studying these teachings on impermanence, no longer seek status or compete with others. This detachment is itself a result of practice. Understanding impermanence leads naturally to freedom from worldly ambitions and the competitive drive for status. Once you live by the principle of impermanence, the pursuits of others seem meaningless. We must seriously contemplate and meditate on the teaching above. This is neither a catchphrase nor something incomprehensible. You need to take the time and effort to reflect on this principle again and again. If we truly believe the principle of impermanence, we shall know how we approach daily life. This is vital. While many understand impermanence intellectually, few actually practice it, except for a very small minority. Who knows how many have truly generated the understanding of impermanence in their hearts? This realization depends on one's regular contemplation and reflection. The above discussion shows that even elevated status holds no reliability. Next, let us examine how relationships between loved ones and enemies lack any permanence. Both friendship and enmity are subject to impermanence. Once, when Venerable Kātyāyana went out begging for alms, he saw a householder eating fish with relish while holding his son, and striking with stones a dog that was gnawing on bones. This happened when Kātyāyana was begging in the city. He witnessed this scene. The householder patron was holding a very adorable child, while eating fish with great enjoyment. This reminded me of when I was young, and was still a householder. I never dared to eat fish. At school, whenever fish was served, it was painful for me, as I would only eat some rice on such days, unable to eat fish. But many of you, including some monastics, salivate upon hearing about a fish dish. This means your old habits have revived, and most of you must have devoured fish, right? The fish might have been the flesh of your parents or relatives in past lives, so you should wipe your mouth and make proper repentance. Back to the story now. That person was eating fish while beating the mother dog with a stone. However, what the master saw with his clairvoyant vision was the following. This fish was the patron's father's rebirth. That dog was his mother's rebirth. And the child he held in his arms was the reincarnation of an enemy who had killed him in a past life, now born as his son to repay karmic debts. After understanding this truth, the Venerable One spoke a verse, as this entire situation was most extraordinary. The beloved child he held was actually an enemy who had killed him in a past life. The meat he ate with such relish was his father. The one he hated and threw stones at was his mother, not from before, but from this life. At that time, his parents had likely passed away, but after death, they were immediately reborn into his household. Indeed, sometimes it's truly like this. Our relatives tend to reincarnate as beings connected to our lives. Thus, those we've harmed or whose flesh we've consumed were likely our own family members. Yet those we cling to most dearly, our emotional attachments and cherished family bonds, are often past or present enemies, manifesting before us to settle karmic debts. Examining this through genuine Buddhist principles, our strongest attachments and deepest affections often point to that person being our former enemy. These days, young people frequently ask me about their intense emotional bonds, saying things like, "I can't live without this person." I think about them all the time. "Can you tell me whether we were husband and wife in a previous life?" I always answer them in this way. You two must have been enemies in a past life. My answer is not just a random comment without any scriptural evidence. If you cannot live without a person, and you'd commit suicide if you lose him or her, this means your emotional attachment must be the karmic retribution from a previous life. In contrast, those you dislike in this life might well be family members, whom you were mutually most attached to in past lives. Even in this lifetime, people begin with intense attachment, but end up in hatred. Upon witnessing this extraordinary and remarkable scene, Venerable Kātyāyana sang this song of realization, eating the flesh of the father, beating the mother, embracing the enemy who will kill you, wife gnawing the husband's bones. How wondrous are the ways of samsara. Those who are mortal enemies in this life may later become the closest of friends and even family. Such transformations from enmity to deep friendship are not uncommon. Therefore, the previous story demonstrated the importance and changes of relationships. Please don't think of the story above as just a legend from the sutras or a simple story. And you can be indifferent to it. Never think it like that. You must be deeply aware of the impermanence of interpersonal love and hatred. With this understanding, your attachment to others will slowly fade, which can be a great help to your practice. Otherwise, you will remain entangled in worldly, shallow ideas, unable to break free. This truly hinders our spiritual practice. Therefore, we must understand these karmic relationships from past lives. The Vinaya Sutra contains such a story. There was once a person who deeply, intensely loved his son. Later, he created much negative karma for his son's sake before dying. When the father died, he couldn't let go of his attachment to his son, and so he was reborn as a bull in the family. Later, his son slaughtered the bull and ate the beef. When the bull died, he was again reborn as a bull in the family, and his son again killed him. For a third time, he was reborn as a bull in the family. As the bull grew bigger in a few years of time, the son was about to kill him again. That's when Sariputra showed up at the front door. With his clairvoyance, Sariputra heard the bull say, "I have been born here twice, but you killed me every time. My dear son, now you are about to kill me again, which makes me so sad. I really cannot take it anymore, but there is nothing I can do." Sariputra, upon knowing this, told the whole story to the son. So the family ended up not killing the bull this time, but set it free. Hence the meat we eat in our daily life might be coming from our family members of a previous life. I recall many intriguing stories in the Madhyama Agama, which you should read often when possible. You should read inspiring books that help you understand the law of karma, so that you know what to do and what not to do. Don't emulate those who dislike classical sutras and shastras, but only like fiction on violence or romance. These books bring no benefit, but instead may bring great harm to one's mind stream. So, we should avoid reading through the harmful books. Well, in the Madhyama Agama, there is a story about a man named Thuti, who was reborn as a dog in his son's house, which is similar to this story. Along the same line, there is also a story of a man named Chandana, whose father was reborn as a beggar. When he came begging at his son's house, the very home where he had once lived as a wealthy father, his son, not recognizing him in his new form, became furiously angry at the beggar's persistence. He violently dragged him out, breaking his arm in the doorway of the house he had once owned. There are innumerable stories like this. Hence, we should give generous offerings to beings with whom we have affinity, be they friends, enemies, or beggars, and take good care of them. When they come before you, recite Avalokiteshvara's mantra in your heart while trying your best to make offerings and care for them. Here is a Tibetan traditional belief. When people sit still, mosquitoes or bees come, hovering around and not leaving, constantly circling and not leaving, especially in cities when mosquitoes buzz by your ear at night with that buzz sound. You shouldn't react with aversion. These persistent insects might be karmically connected beings seeking attention. Don't just react with a sudden smack, killing them. These insects might be your relatives from past lives, specifically coming to request food. At such moments, one should either recite Avalokiteshvara's mantra or make offerings. This is crucial. According to the Lankavatara Sutra, we should understand that all the meat we consume nowadays is likely the flesh of our parents or relatives from previous lives. There is a close connection among those beings to us. As it said, "When I observe beings devouring each other's flesh, none are other than relatives." What the Buddha meant was that, when he looked at beings, any animal whose meat we eat had been our relative in past lives. In other words, the yak's beef you ate today is from this yak who was your loved one in a past life. If I eat pork today, this pig was also closely related to me in past lives. Therefore, it's better not to eat meat. The merit of not eating meat is immeasurable. Everyone must understand this principle. If we truly recognize that in this cycle of samsara, we are all repeatedly reborn as each other's fathers and mothers, we will develop the mind of renunciation from the various comedies and tragedies in samsara, and not cling to them strongly. Not only are such stories found in Indian and Tibetan Buddhism, but in Chinese Buddhism as well. When I taught you the verse of men who fathered sons in turn are sons, and mothers likewise daughters, in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, I mentioned a story about Chan Master Ji Gong, or commonly known as Master Bao Zhi in Chinese Buddhism. His well-known story about how the father took rebirth as the son, and mother as the wife. Let's look at the story. Master Bao Zhi, who was regarded as the emanation of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, was the imperial master of Emperor Wu of Liang. Once, Bao Zhi was invited to attend a wedding. When Master Bao Zhi entered the house and arrived at the gathering, with his clairvoyance, he witnessed precisely what Venerable Kātyāyana had observed, the complex web of karmic relationships connecting the wedding's main participants and others present. The Zen master, struck by this revelation of samsara's nature, felt overwhelming renunciation and spontaneously broke into spiritual songs. These songs, containing different episodes, expressed in the following verses: strange upon strange, weird upon weird, the grandson marries his grandmother, the daughter eats her mother's bones, the son beats a drum made of his father's skin, and so the verse went. He said it was extremely strange and rare. Why? Because the grandson had married his grandmother, meaning the bride was actually the reincarnation of his grandmother. These verses reveal the hidden karmic relationships underlying seemingly ordinary family connections. When his grandmother was about to die, she held the hand of her beloved grandson and was very reluctant to let him go, so she died with great attachment to the grandson. In Tibet, there is a custom: when someone is dying, never let them hold your hand, or else their spirit might cling to you. If they grasp your neck or hand, they may appear later in dreams or other forms. Once, a man's younger sister was about to die. Before she passed, she kept calling him to come near. He was terrified and immediately called me, saying, "My younger sister is about to die, but I'm afraid to get close. What if she grabs me? If she grabs me, will her spirit cling to me afterward?" His concerns were reasonable. Back to the verses. Just as how the grandmother clung to the grandson, after her death, she was reborn as a girl. After she grew up, the grandson married his grandmother's reincarnation. This explains the line, "grandson marries grandmother." Then, when the Zen master went inside, he saw a girl eating meat, seemingly gnawing on pig's feet. Through his wisdom, he perceived that the girl's mother had been reborn as the pig. the seemingly ordinary act of eating revealed a horrific karmic connection, a daughter unknowingly consuming her reborn mother's flesh. The pig was slaughtered for the meal at the wedding, so the little girl was eating her mother's flesh. Then, in the courtyard, someone was fervently beating a drum made of donkey skin. The Zen master realized that this person's father had been reborn as a donkey, killed and skinned, and the skin was turned into a drum, which was now being beaten by the sun. Then he went outside, where people were joyfully singing and dancing at the gathering. So the master went on and sang, "Pigs and sheep sit on the bed, while relatives boil in the pot. People come to celebrate joy, but I say, suffering, suffering, suffering." Such were his words when he entered the house. Master Bao Zhi looked at those who were sitting on the bed made of bricks. They were pigs and sheep that had eaten in the past, now are reborn as humans and relatives to each other, gathering together happily. The animals being cooked in the cauldron, however, were the groom's family and relatives, who were reborn as animals, slaughtered and boiled. After understanding through his wisdom and clairvoyance, the master realized that while people felt this was a joyous day, the true performance of samsara was both laughable and absurd, to the extent of being extremely painful. If we could truly see this, would anyone want to participate? Likely no one would. Anyone would be terrified. But we continue to be trapped because we lack clairvoyance and knowledge of past lives. Moreover, we remain completely ignorant about distinguishing between causes and effects. The foolish actions we commit as a result are beyond words to describe. We should realize that many worldly affairs lack any true meaning or significance, which is why understanding impermanence is absolutely essential. I recall in the Buddhist canon, there is a text called the Dharmapada Avadana Sutra, which teaches these profound truths about impermanence through stories and parables. The story goes, there was a rich Brahmin who was very stingy. At every mealtime, he would keep the house door closed to uninviting guests. I've noticed some of our fellow Dharma friends are like this too. Anyhow, around noontime, smoke rises from his kitchen stove, but the door stays shut, impossible to push open. I know a few Sangha like that who live nearby my place too. Only after eating do they open the door. Once during a meal, he killed a chicken to cook. Then he, his wife, and their child began eating the chicken meat with great relish, enjoying their family feast. At that moment, Shakyamuni Buddha, through his perfect wisdom, observed that the conditions for taming this person had fully ripened. He manifested in the appearance of a bhikshu, taking the form of an ordinary wandering monk who happened to pass by their home. Displaying miraculous powers, the monk appeared in their courtyard despite the closed door. Seeing the monk, the Brahmin was very angry, saying, "How shameless you are! How can you break in without permission?" The monk answered, "Actually, you are the one who is shameless and ignorant. You killed your father, married your mother, and are now nurturing as your child the one who had killed you." The Brahmin was confused and asked why the monk said that. The monk answered, "The chicken on the dining table is the reincarnation of your father. Your child is the reincarnation of a Rakshasa, or a flesh-eating devil who brought harm to you in your previous life. But now, he has become the one you nurture and care for." He narrated the entire karmic play unfolding in samsara. The person later developed a sense of renunciation from the cycle of rebirth. Through the teachings of the monk and the power of the Buddha, he was able to recall their past lives and the various causes and conditions that led to their current state. He later attained the first stage of enlightenment, and there are many such stories about this in the Buddhist scriptures. The scriptures contain many rich and detailed accounts related to the law of karma and its effects, including narratives that are similar to, but slightly different from the ones discussed in the text on past and present lives, composed by Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro. Fellow practitioners, I've shared quite a few stories in my teaching, so that people with different predispositions may receive benefits in your own way. As long as you remember one of the stories and find it inspiring, you will make the right choices in your future life. Otherwise, if you know nothing about the law of karma, you may fall deeper and deeper into the abyss of samsara. Therefore, I believe that letting the teachings sink in is paramount. It takes time to sharpen your edges to notice and abide by the Dharma principles. And it doesn't happen overnight. It is very unlikely that you will achieve realization as quickly and easily as dropping a stone to the ground. It's through continuing effort to gradually establish right views, such as the law of karma. These views in your mind will get increasing clarity in time. Conversely, even close blood relatives, like one's own parents, can harbor resentment and animosity towards each other over minor material possessions, leading to mutual harm. As mentioned earlier, even among loved ones and friends, there can be different karmic connections from past lives. Similarly, although someone may be one's own flesh and blood, their relationship may be strained due to those unseen karmic ties from previous existences. It is quite common for relationships to be damaged or even destroyed over minor material possessions or trivial matters like disagreements in speech and language. Even among the closest of relations, such as spouses or family members, small and insignificant issues can lead to enmity and even violence. In this secular world, many relationships do not require major events to be disrupted. Just a few careless words or petty disputes can be enough to turn loved ones against each other. As said in The Way of the Bodhisattva, among ordinary people, establishing emotional bonds is quite easy. Just give them a small material gift, some kind words, or a simple smile, and they quickly become one's closest friend. Conversely, relationships that were once very close and inseparable can easily fall apart, such as when a friend fails to visit or support you in times of difficulty, or when one friend used an inappropriate word during a conversation, the other one became angry and never spoke to them again. So, it is hard to please a worldly person. It's difficult to meet everyone's expectations. In your life journey, many should have experienced the complexity of human relationships. Building good relationships is easy. Saying a kind word or giving a small gift can be enough. Some people treasure something simply because it was given by a specific person and say, "This was given to me by so-and-so. It's an incomparable treasure." They cherish it as if it were a wish-fulfilling jewel. But if that person fails to give them something once or gives it to someone else, they can quickly turn into enemies. The relationships between loved ones and adversaries, whether within a family or in any other context, are inherently impermanent. Many people can recognize this truth based on their own experiences. Whether they are close relatives and friends or bitter enemies, all connections are subject to constant change and flux. Therefore, we should cultivate a compassionate heart and care for all sentient beings, which is a core and unshakable principle of Mahayana Buddhism. This is a truly noble and admirable spiritual principle that we should strive to learn. We should cultivate a sincere and loving heart of compassion towards all sentient beings. This is the feeling that each of us who has studied the Bodhicharyavatara should have. I am often humbled when I think about how our spiritual teachers selflessly dedicate themselves without any concern for their own well-being. This spirit is most worthy of our deep emulation and practice. The altruistic spirit exemplified by great practitioners of the past has made an indelible contribution to the propagation of the Dharma and the liberation of all beings. However, as their followers, can we truly emulate this lofty mindset? When reflecting on this alone, I often feel deeply humbled and sometimes embarrassed, especially when my own selfish tendencies are strong. When various situations arise, difficulty and anguish also arise. Then we'd end up experiencing many afflictions and troubles. Therefore, all the monastics and lay followers here must make the aspiration to emulate the great masters of the past. We must strive to develop a heart of compassion that regards all living beings with equality, whether they are our own flesh and blood siblings or those we consider our enemies. This impartial loving kindness is the key. Although it is difficult for an ordinary person to treat everyone equally, we must understand that this is the principle we need to uphold. Only this kind of impartial, everlasting affection can be truly stable and unshakable. Otherwise, the close personal relationships we have today can easily turn into enmity over time. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that we cultivate this attitude of equality and compassion towards all sentient beings, no matter their relation to us. This is a crucial principle we must take to heart. Next, let's discuss how suffering and joy are also impermanent. Both happiness and suffering are impermanent. Some people are wealthy and joyful in the first half of life, but then become destitute and poor in the latter half. In my memories from childhood, I saw many leaders who were rich, powerful, and affluent. Now, these same people have become helpless and pitiable, with many falling to the status of beggars. This transformation is commonly seen as well, which also illustrates life's unpredictable nature. Some people have experienced immense suffering in the first half of their lives, only to then go on to have a happy and fulfilling second half. In the past, there were those who were labeled as landlords and were targeted through class struggle, causing great anguish for many. However, due to changes in the country's policies, these same people are now living in happiness and prosperity, with wealth and status, all within the span of a few decades. This demonstrates the impermanence and unpredictability of one's circumstances in life. In just a few decades, their lives underwent a complete reversal. There have even been people who started out as beggars and ended up as kings. Many Buddhist scriptures and stories contain numerous cases that illustrate this. For example, there is the story of Milarepa's uncle, who in the morning was celebrating his son's wedding with a grand feast, only to have his house collapse in the afternoon, leaving him in anguished wails. The tragic scene was beyond imagination. Milarepa's uncle and aunt were the main perpetrators against Milarepa. Milarepa left home to study black magic. While his uncle and aunt were having a big party to celebrate the impending marriage of their son, Milarepa took his revenge by summoning a spell to demolish their house, killing 35 people. This occurred when a stallion mistreated a mare, and the other horses kicked the stallion, leading to this catastrophic outcome. It seems that when the supporting pillar was damaged by the horses' kicks, the entire house collapsed. Although his uncle's family appeared quite wealthy at the time, a single horse kicking the pillar was enough to bring down the whole structure, unlike a concrete pillar. All 35 people inside the house were then perished. It seems Milarepa orchestrated this tragedy so that his uncle and aunt would witness and experience the consequences of their past actions against him. Within half a day, a happy wedding party became a tragedy. Other than the uncle and aunt, everyone else died in that collapse. There are so many examples of impermanence in joy and sorrow, such as the Wenchuan earthquake and the September 11 attacks. On a seemingly auspicious day, terrorists initiated one of the deadliest attacks in human history, bringing unimaginable suffering on that day. Therefore, happiness is transitory and doesn't last forever. In this world, There are many instances where people can swing from great happiness to deep suffering in an instant. This phenomenon of the impermanence of joy and pain is extremely common. When we are feeling tremendously happy, we must not think that this state will last forever. Conversely, when in deep anguish, we cannot assume the pain will never end. What is different for those who seek the Dharma is that, despite temporarily enduring hardship and adversity, they will ultimately find the sweetness after the bitterness and attain the highest bliss. Just like the Buddhas of the past, as well as realized masters like Milarepa, those who endure hardship and ascetic practices in pursuit of the Dharma are engaged in a most worthwhile and meritorious endeavor. Therefore, whether it is to receive a teaching, an oral transmission, or to engage in spiritual practice, no matter how much suffering and deprivation we may experience in our lives, we must be willing to accept it wholeheartedly. This is the path that the great beings of the past have walked. Especially when we are relatively young, the tremendous effort and ascetic practices we undertake in pursuit of the Dharma will undoubtedly lead to the experience of supreme bliss in our later years and lifetimes to come. The biography of Milarepa clearly illustrates this. Whether in the Tibetan or Han regions, the entire world is full of those who revere and admire Milarepa. His unparalleled hardships and austerities during his spiritual practice are something we must all understand and appreciate, especially upon seeing the ultimate realization and attainment Milarepa achieved, and how he ultimately benefited countless beings. Therefore, for all of us here engaged in spiritual practice, there is no doubt that we too can reach such heights of accomplishment. The key lies in whether we are willing to put in the effort during the processes of study, contemplation, and meditation. We need not compare ourselves to the likes of Milarepa, but can look to the biographies of the great masters of Tibetan and Han Chinese Buddhism for inspiration. You can see clearly that, as soon as they made firm resolutions, they dedicated themselves earnestly to their practice. By their later years, they were completely differentiated from ordinary people, whether in terms of their realization or altruistic intentions. When a practitioner attains realization, the radiance of altruism and wisdom of enlightenment will bring endless benefits to others. This is a natural law. In contrast, if you have not attained any insight or realization states throughout your practice of the Dharma, then even if you achieve a certain status or prestigious degree, any positive experience derived from it will be short-lived and eventually vanish. So, each one of us, regardless of who we are, should practice the Dharma genuinely to bring about inner realization. This realization does not arise without cause or reason. It requires your personal effort. Whether you are intelligent or not, as long as you put in the effort, you will gain realization proportionate to your effort. This is a definite principle. I feel it is very worthwhile to study the words of my perfect teacher. We should contemplate the text over and over again. Some people do not give enough importance to this text. When they come to study at Larong Ga, they show no interest in getting a copy of the words of my perfect teacher. Instead, they ask around to get texts of the most profound Tantra. Well, they can get the Tantra copies, but if they don't even know the very basic principle of impermanence, however profound the Tantra is, it is unlikely to provide them with any significant benefits. For instance, imagine someone in elementary school who doesn't even know the basics of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division wants to get a third-year college mathematics textbook. They can keep the book, but without a proper foundation, they won't comprehend it. Even if they seem to understand it superficially, it won't truly benefit their mind stream. Therefore, we must first establish a solid foundation. I have been emphasizing this repeatedly, again and again. We must practice in the right order, which will eventually bring good fruition. Okay, that's all for today. What an engaging teaching. I have been teaching in this valley for over 20 years, and never have I received such a warm reception. Today I prefer.
Sonandai Tancha Tobaya Tonani Jama Basi Jirgana Jirano Chubai Jupun Sonen Droa Droa
Bandangara Badna Asadarda Bandangara Badna Asada Bandangara Badna Asadarda